April Fool's Day, supposed to be a time for laughter, pranks, and harmless jokes. But what happens when things take a dark turn? Some pranks go too far, turning joy into horror, and laughter into tragedy. Today on SpectraShowcase, we're diving into some of the most chilling, real-life April Fool's Day incidents that ended in devastating consequences. These stories will make you think twice about what's just a joke and what could become a nightmare. Stay with us as we unravel these unsettling tales. In March, I had only one thing on my mind. I wanted to marry my girlfriend. We had been together for over a year, and I was absolutely devoted to her. Both of us were still living with our parents, so instead of struggling to move out separately, we could do it together. The thought of proposing consumed me all through March, and as April approached, I just couldn't wait any longer. The day I finally decided to ask her just happened to be April Fool's Day, but this wasn't a joke. I was completely serious. That evening, I went over to her house, ready to propose. Her parents weren't home, so as usual, we made the most of our alone time. After a while, as we cuddled on the couch, I felt the nerves creeping in. She noticed and giggled, assuming it was because of her. Little did she know, I was summoning the courage to ask the biggest question of my life. Finally, I took a deep breath and blurted it out. "Will you marry me?" Her smile faded instantly. I'm sorry, but no. My heart stopped. Wait, this is an April Fool's prank, right? You're joking. But she shook her head. No. I'm not joking. It's just too soon. I felt like my world had collapsed. Desperate, I begged her to admit she was joking, but every time I pleaded, she only became firmer in her rejection. My love for her twisted into something dark. How could she do this to me? I had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away with one word. My emotions spiraled out of control. Blinded by rage, I stormed into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and returned to the living room. The last thing I remember was the terror in her eyes. Then, everything went red. When I came back to my senses, I was covered in blood. The knife was clenched in my hand. My mind refused to accept what I had done. I dropped the weapon and fled the house, leaving her lifeless on the floor. I ran all the way home, stripped off my stained clothes, and stepped into the shower. But no matter how much water washed over me, I couldn't get clean. I kept whispering to myself, it wasn't real, it was just an April Fool's joke, But reality hit hard. By the end of the day, I was arrested. Her parents must have been shattered when they found her. Every year on April Fool's Day, I relived that nightmare. If only she had said yes. This disturbing story was inspired by a real-life incident that took place on March 30th. Rehan Ahmed, a man from India, allegedly took his girlfriend Farida Khatun's life after she turned down his marriage proposal. Believing it had to be an April Fool's prank, he lost control when he realized she was serious. Witnesses discovered the crime scene, and the suspect later surrendered to the police. This case serves as a grim reminder of how fragile the line is between love and obsession. Story 2. The deadly prank. Kyle was always the jokester. He and I attended the same engineering college, but while I took my studies seriously, he was the class clown. He constantly tried to get me to skip lectures, but I never let him drag me down. Even so, Kyle barely attended 10% of our classes. One evening, after another missed lecture, I sent him a text, but he didn't reply. Figuring he had just overslept, I moved on with my night, played a few rounds of cards, and eventually went to bed. But in the middle of the night, my phone rang. It was Kyle. FaceTiming me. Too exhausted, I ignored it. The calls kept coming, 10 in total, but I still didn't answer. Finally, at 4 a.m., I picked up, ready to tell him off, but the sight on my screen made my blood run cold. Kyle was in a dark room, his face soaked in sweat and streaked with tears. Worst of all, there was a noose around his neck. "I don't know where I am," he whispered. "They said they're going to kick the stool from under me. Stop messing around. Tell me where you are," I shouted, but then he smirked. April Fools, I was furious. It had only tricked me for a few seconds, but the impact was real. There was no chance of me getting back to sleep after that, so I stayed up, sipping coffee, fuming over his tasteless joke. The next morning, I expected to see him in class so I could confront him, but he never showed up. Later, I was called into the dean's office. Police officers were waiting for me. That's when I learned the devastating truth. Kyle's prank had turned deadly. His roommates found him lifeless, the stool tipped over. He had made one fatal mistake, miscalculating his own joke. This tragic case was inspired by an incident where a young man accidentally took his own life during an April Fool's prank. What was meant to be a joke turned into an irreversible tragedy, proving that some pranks should never be played. April Fool's Day is meant to be a time of light-hearted fun, but these real-life stories prove that a joke taken too far can have horrifying consequences. Let this be a reminder to think twice before playing pranks on others. What might seem harmless to one person could turn into a nightmare for another. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spectra Showcase for more gripping stories. Stay safe, and think before you prank.